It worked well last time, and hopefully will work again tonight. So hopefully those watching, things run smoothly, and those on the rack, we had some practice last time. So let's go ahead and get going. To start tonight, if I could just have the RAC members introduce themselves. Maybe what I'll do is I'll call the name, and then if you can just come on and restate your name and what position you represent. So Bart, you want to go ahead?
Here, non-consumptive representative.
Thank you. Chad.
Here and at-large member.
Austin.
Here, public at large.
Gene.
Here, public at large.
Nick. I think you're muted, Nick. Nick, you're on mute. Can you unmute? We'll go to Tammy and come back. Tammy?
Tammy Pearson, elected official.
Thanks, Tammy. We can see you there, Nick. Can you get the mute going? Maybe we'll have you give us a thumbs up and we'll come back. Hopefully you don't have any great comments that you aren't able to get going. Wave me down if you need us to pause for you, if we can't hear you. My name is Braden Richmond. I'm the chair of the Southern RAC. So tonight, before we get started, I need to read through, because this is a little unique, let me read through the statement regarding the electronic meeting. So bear with me just a minute. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the associated safety guidelines put in place by the CDC, the state of Utah and local health departments, the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, will conduct the May 2020 Regional Advisory Council and Utah Wildlife Board meetings using fully electronic format as approved by Utah Governor Gary Herbert through Executive Order 2020-5. This format will be used in place of the in-person public meetings that usually occur around the state. There will not be an anchor location established for any of the RAC or board meetings for purposes of public attendance. Paul Gedge, I'm not sure how to say that, Gedge, and or other technical support staff will be on site at the DNR complex to oversee the technology for each electronic meeting. UDWR representatives were posted online on UDWR's website on May 5th, presentations, 2020. RAC members, board members, and members of the public should review these presentations prior to their respective meetings, as the presentations will not be shown during the meeting. In this electronic format, members of the public will not only be able to make comments on the UDWR presentation in writing during a public comment period that opened on May 5th, 2020. The public comment period for each of the RAC meetings opened May 5th and will close 72 hours prior to the start of the respective RAC meeting. Comments for the board meeting will be accepted from May 5th until 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time on May 29th. The online location for submitting written comments will be included on the RAC and board agendas, posted on the open and public meeting website, and shared on UDWR's website, social media platforms, and with statewide media outlets. After a RAC comment period closes, UDWR will distribute the comments received along with a summary of those comments for each RAC to the RAC members at least 2 days before the RAC meeting. After the board comment period closes, the UDWR will distribute the comments received along with a summary of the comments to board members at least 5 days before the board meeting. Public comments will not be read at the RAC and board meetings. RAC and board members should review the written comments and the division's summary of those comments prior to their respective meetings. A separate electronic meeting for each RAC and for the board will take place on the scheduled date and time. RAC and board members and participating UDWR staff will receive a link with the instructions of how to connect to the meeting several days prior to the meeting date. The public will not be connected to the video meeting as participants. The electronic RAC and board meetings will be conducted electronically using Hangouts, Meet by Google Meet. The application can be downloaded to your device from your app store. Ensure your phone, tablet, or computer device has the capability to use Google Meet using the Google Chrome browser is highly recommended. Each meeting will be broadcast to the public using YouTube live stream. The link for the YouTube live stream will be included on the RAC and board agendas posted on the Open and Public Forum Public Meetings website and shared on UDWR's website. The YouTube feed will be established solely for the public to watch and or listen to the electronic meetings remotely from their location. Public comment will not be taken during the electronic meeting, but will be handled as described above. Before making and voting on motions, RAC and board members will have the opportunity to communicate with UDWR staff during the respective electronic meetings. They can seek clarification, ask questions on the previously posted presentations. UDWR staff will have the opportunity to make clarifying statements or respond to questions as the need arises. Motions and voting on UDWR's recommendation will take place during the respective electronic RAC and board meetings. This will be done by the chair of each body using a roll call vote. In this electronic format, RAC meeting minutes will be patterned after board minutes, which primarily consist of capturing a record of motions, seconds to motions, voting outcome of each motion, and a timestamp of each motion. The timestamp is the minute and the second of where the discussion begins for each agenda item in the meeting recording. All right. So the first agenda, or the next agenda item, is the approval of the agenda and the minutes from the last RAC. If anyone would make a motion on that.
I'll make a motion that we approve those. It's
Tammy made a motion. We have a second.
I'll second the motion.
Thanks, Chad. So Tammy made a motion to accept and Chad seconded the motion. We'll do a roll call vote just like we did last time. Bart.
Aye.
What's that? Oh, okay, Austin.
Yes.
Gene.
Yes.
Riley is not here, sorry. Chad.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Sean. Sean's not here either, sorry. And Tammy.
Yes.
And Dan.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Let's move on to item number 3, the Wildlife Board meeting update. And I'm just going to run through the motions. Hopefully you guys had a chance to watch that meeting. I think it was a good meeting with some good discussion. But let me run through the pertinent motions. So there was a motion that they decrease the buck deer permits on the cash unit by an additional 800 permits for a total decrease of 1,600 from the 2019 permit numbers. That passed unanimously. There was a motion to reduce the desert bighorn sheep permits on the West Kaparowitz unit from 12 to 12 permits, the same as in 2019. That passed 5 in favor, 1 opposed. There was a motion to increase the Henry Mountain archery only bison permit by 1 permit to equal 2 total resident permits. That passed unanimously. There was a motion to decrease the permits on the San Juan Abajo buck deer hunt by an additional 150 permits, bringing the total decrease to 650, and to ask the division to look at moving the unit to an 18 to 20 buck to doe unit. That passed unanimously. There was a motion to keep the bull elk permits on the Central Mountains Nebo unit at the 2019 permit numbers, that'd be 47, and ask the elk committee to address the age objectives on this unit and any others that are not meeting their numbers. That passed unanimously. There was a motion to decrease buck tags on the LaSalle Mountains by an additional 100 permits, bringing the total from 1,300 to 1,200. I think that's backwards. A decrease of an additional 100 permits. That passed unanimously. Another motion that we accept the remainder of the recommendations for bucks, bulls, once in a lifetime permits, and that passed unanimously. On the antlerless section, there was a motion to reduce the antlerless tags on the Book Cliffs and roadless unit to a total of 150 tags. That passed unanimous. And then the rest of the Antlers recommendations passed as presented. And then the rest of the presentations also passed as presented. And then a regional update. I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Braden. Before I begin the regional update, I'd like to welcome the other division employees that are on the join the meeting tonight for the RAC members' benefit. All of the presenters that you from the videos that you watched online will be available tonight for questions, and so please don't hesitate to ask. In addition, we have our wildlife section staff from the Southern region on and available to answer questions as well. As far as an update goes, our office is beginning to transition back to what will become some sort of a new normal. I'm not sure we know what that is, what that means yet, but there are more people in the office now than there have been with the transition from orange to yellow by the governor. Our wildlife section is beginning to think about the deer unit plans and how to go about gathering public input for those, and that process will begin here within the next few weeks to a month. Our aquatic section is continuing their gill netting surveys. They pulled the nets on Kolob last week. You may remember that we had to completely remove all the fish from Kolob because of some illegal introductions a couple of years ago, but that lake is recovering well. We don't have the size back in those fish yet, but the fish that were there are healthy and they should grow rather quickly this summer. And the aquatic crew will be gill netting Fish Lake and Navajo this week. Our habitat section, those of you that are familiar with the Elbow Ranch over in Paiute County, we're wrapping up the construction there, and we're looking for an agricultural producer to partner with us on a lease on that property. We've installed an irrigation system, a pivot that will irrigate 110 acres with an opportunity to expand that in the future. And so we're trying to partner there so that we can raise a crop that somebody can harvest, but also will benefit wildlife. Our outreach section, dedicated hunter projects are ramping up quickly, and that will continue over the next several months. As most of you are aware, the big game draw results are out. Most people have received their emails. If not, they'll be coming shortly. And then just as a reminder, the antler list application opens next Friday on May 28th. From our law enforcement section, they continue to be really busy between patrolling turkey hunters and also helping the Wasatch County parks, helping our state parks department has been keeping them really busy. There's a lot of visitors that have been coming up from Las Vegas and California to the state parks in Washington County, and that comes with some challenges. And that's all I have as a regional update. Unless there are any questions from the RAC, I'd be happy to answer them.
This is Gene. There was supposed to be an inventory or something on deer in the southern region this year. What became of that?
Gene, I'm not sure what you're referring to there, unless it's the deer unit plans, and that's what I mentioned first. We'll be redoing our deer unit plans in the southern region, which will include updated population objectives, and that may be what you're referring to. But that's not a survey. That'll be based on data that we already have and working with and taking some public input. Is that maybe what you were thinking about, Gene?
Yeah, that's what I was wanting to know.
Okay. Yeah, well, those are due to the Salt Lake office, I think September 1st. Is that right, Teresa? And so July and August we'll be working on those in earnest. Are there any other questions?
All right, thanks, Kevin. We'll move on to the first agenda item. So the first action item tonight is the Upland Game and Turkey Guidebook Rules and Recommendations. So I will actually turn it back to Kevin to give us the summary of comments from the public.
Well, our public comments are going to be really easy tonight. We had a total of 2 for each presentation. On this particular one, we had 1 in favor and 1 opposed. So we have a coin toss. They're both comments that came in from groups, one from the Turkey Federation and the other one from Pheasants Forever. And I hope you had a chance to read through those. And feel free to ask any questions about those comments.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. We'll open it up to the RAC for questions. Yeah, let's do it maybe how we did it last meeting, and we'll do a roll call for questions. That way we make sure to capture any questions you may have. So sorry, Austin, you're at the top of the list again tonight. We'll try to mix it up a little bit, but we'll start with you. Any questions?
I do have a question, just as it relates to some of the recommendations we received as RAC members about a potential modification of the youth general season turkey hunt. And I'm just curious for the division, more of the history on this youth hunt. I understand, if I'm not mistaken, 15% of limited entry turkey permits are reserved for youth applicants, but the general season hunt, do we have any idea how many youth are participating in that and what the satisfaction is on that hunt?
Thanks for that question. It can take just a few minutes to pull up the youth numbers from last year, since the general season hunt is still ongoing this year. We don't have that data yet for 2020, but if you guys want to wait for a few minutes, I can go ahead and look up that from last year.
Yeah, maybe we'll get a couple, or if anyone else has other questions, and then we could come back while you're looking that up. Austin, do you have any additional questions?
No, I do not believe so.
All right. Bart, do you have any questions?
Is this the appropriate time to talk about the wildlife management areas, or is that for migratory? The migratory birds.
I think,
That's
yeah.
part of my presentation. Sorry, Braden.
Okay.
That's what I thought. So I wanted to just be clear. So the recommendation is basically DWR wants to be able to, at any time, close wildlife management areas, and not just without prior authorization. Is that correct?
Right. And the reason for that is because we've hosted several of those organized youth pheasant hunts that I'm sure you've probably heard about throughout the state. And a lot of those that have been hosted in the past where we have not closed specific WMAs, we've had issues with the general public coming onto those hunts. And some of the biggest issues with that is that these are co-sponsored events with SFW, and they're actually purchasing those birds for us to supply to these organized events. So if we've got some issues with the general public going on to those properties for things like that, we just really want to reserve it for the people that are the participants of those events. Ogden Bay is a newer organized pheasant hunt that just came up. And because that wasn't filtered into this 3-year recommendation 3 years ago, so we weren't able to close it in the guidebook. So there would be enough notice for a closure to be posted in the guidebook, but because it's a 3-year recommendation, we would just like to be able to do that for division hosted or co-hosted events for the public.
Bart, your mic isn't on.
So the purpose of the WMAs, and correct me if I'm wrong, one is to protect wildlife, others, number 2, benefit the public, right? So will you always, only open wildlife or these wildlife management areas when you're going to have, a release for a specific hunt? Otherwise, if you open it up and you don't have some sort of release where you augment the population, that's what's going to be taken, you'll basically be taking the population that you're trying to, I assume, protect. And so it gives you a lot of latitude without really any rails, any guardrails. That's my concern.
So I'm not quite sure what you mean as far as closing it only for time. Sorry, Bart, can you mute your stuff for
I'm
a
sorry.
second? Sorry, I'm getting some feedback. Thank you. So maybe rephrase that question for me because I'm not exactly sure what you're getting at here. We just want to be able to close it for sponsored events that are meant for the public. So if there is a particular event on the WMAs that is open to the public that any public person can register for, we would like to have that latitude within the 3-year guidebook cycle so that we can close those WMAs to prohibit the general public from coming on there once we have everything in place for those events. So, but your question was more for augmenting populations. And I muted, you're on mute too, sorry.
Sorry, I'm used to a lot of these meetings, but we just are always just off mute, so apologize. So you mentioned that the Ogden, what you're going to do in Ogden, they're actually going to, the sponsors of the event are going to buy birds, release them, and those are what are going to be hunted. Is that correct? So, and that I assume, will that be the standard practice when you do these? Or are you not going to put any standard operating procedures for when you close WMAs to open them for, a hunt? I'm just concerned, it's like, as long as we're it seems to me that it's fine as long as the purpose of the hunt is to meet one of those two metrics. Either you're protecting the population or you're benefiting the hunt. You're benefiting the general public through hunter training, hunter education, teaching youth or a group to learn to hunt safely or properly. But if it's just a shoot 'em up, it seems like you're not really benefiting the public as a whole what you'd want a WMA to do, and you're actually possibly hurting the population.
Okay, so with some of those organized pheasant hunts that we've held in the past, because I've actually hosted quite a few when I was in the southern region, and we did have issues. You'd think that, the general public, that grown adults wouldn't try to sneak on there to take that opportunity from these kids that have pre-registered and things. But, that is actually an issue, and we want to make sure that we're being safe with some of those things too. So that way we're limiting the number of people on this WMA at one time if we're conducting a hunt like that. And it doesn't have anything to do with any population since it's just rooster pheasants that are released for these hunts. So if there were to have any event that would be closed, it would be for the benefit of the general public. That's what we're asking for, is to be closed for events that would benefit the public. So this particular action item isn't concerning the population of any wildlife in the WMAs.
No, I understand that. I just wanted to make sure that it's not detrimental to the population. Okay, but you answered my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Bart. Gene, do you have any questions?
I do. On the sage hen hunting, the presentation said there's 4 areas that are open to sage hen hunting. Is there, if we pass the regulation, or we pass the recommendations as they are, does that mean in the next 3 years that will be the situation that only 4 areas will be open to sage hen hunting?
Great question. Thanks, Gene. what we have right now in place that the board has previously approved as far as greater sage-grouse hunts is that the breeding population needs to be 500 individuals. So we have a whole permit calculator, and if you'd like me to go into that, I definitely can, just to see how we come up with those numbers. But we need the breeding population has to be at 500 for both the high and the low population trends. Since with sage grouse, as you know, they start to kind of have a 10-year cycle of trending up and down. So if something changes drastically in a population and they drop well below the 500, then we would close an area. If something happens and a population grows exponentially, and we can see that over the course of several years that it's staying above that 500, then we would have the latitude to open another hunt, and which we would bring that to the board.
Is that 500 statewide or 500 per area?
It's for the breeding population in that area.
Okay, what is the sage-grouse situation this year? Is with all the effort that goes into it, are we getting more chickens out there?
Good question. So we are not quite finished with all of our data compilation. That will happen the first part of June. So we'll have definitive answers that first week or so of June as far as how the population's doing. We have some places that have increased and some places have decreased. So we just have to wait until we get all those numbers back so we can compile all the data.
Is that when you'll decide how much transplanting you need to do and where?
We can definitely look into that, yeah, and explore options on whether or not we need to do transplants or take any other management considerations.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Gene. Chad, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions.
All right, Nick?
No questions.
Okay, Tammy?
My only question, excuse me, when I can't remember who it was that asked about the turkeys. Are any of the bird permits on these draw tags, are they also eligible for the mentoring program?
The bird permits for turkeys, are turkeys eligible? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Oh, I wish I could remember off the top of my head whether turkeys are part of the mentoring or the trial hunting. I thought that they were one or the other, but I don't dare give a definitive answer. Let me check on that and I'll get back to you. While we're looking at that, do you guys want me to get back to that general season youth information really quickly? Just so I can give.
Let's actually go to Dan and see if he has any questions, and then we'll follow up with the earlier ones. That way we'll have gone through everybody, if that's okay. Dan, did you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
All right. Yeah, so Heather, now let's follow up on that question, then Tammy's question, then we can see if Austin or Tammy have any follow-up questions.
Great. So I have the spring youth general season wild turkey harvest stats in front of me right now, and it looks like overall the hunters afield was 1,202, and the total harvest was 391, and their percent success was 32.5. So that's for the youth general season hunters.
Heather,
Austin.
this is Austin. I just had a follow-up question there, if that's okay, Mr. Chair. Just was there a satisfaction rating on that? Is that a question on that survey?
That's an awesome question. I can see if we've got that somewhere in the harvest statistics, because I was just looking at the Upland Game annual report. So it might take me a minute longer to find that, but I can get that out to you. And if I'm not able to find it here in this time, I can email it to to Braden to disseminate to the RAC, if that works.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Were you able to find Tammy's question? Have you had enough time?
I'm just barely looking it up right now. So it looks like if you get one of those mentee licenses, then you can apply for a turkey limited entry permit or do a general season.
I have a question along with SFW's proposal on this extended youth hunt. I'd just be curious to hear your input, if you have any concerns with that recommendation or request, any comments you have.
Sure, thank you. So our stance on this is that biologically it really doesn't make any difference because people would still be hunting the second Saturday in April through the end of May. But we could see how there could be issues with other hunters being displaced a little bit. So that first week of May is generally the best as far as harvest is concerned for the general season. So I could see how if we bump it back a week, you know, and turkeys continue to get more and more quiet and more difficult to call in, that the general season hunters may have some issues with that. Like somebody pointed out earlier, we do allocate 25% of the limited entry tags to youth. If they don't harvest, they can hunt that youth hunt the 3 days all to themselves. And if they still don't harvest, they can still hunt through the end of May. And then if they do just buy a tag for that youth hunt or general season, they would have that whole month of May as well. So, so as far as changing the structure, that's just something that would be up to the RAC and board if they decided they would want to do that, but we're not recommending any changes at this time.
All right, thanks, Heather. I know we went through everyone, but just let me give another second here if anybody has any additional questions. It's difficult on this format to make sure that everyone's got to speak their piece. So if there's any additional questions, please just speak up.
Yeah, I've got want to follow up on this on the prairie chickens. There has to be 500 pairs per area, or some areas probably aren't large enough to have 500 pairs. For instance, the sage hens seem to be doing pretty well in Johns Valley, but I don't think that area is going to have 500 pairs anytime soon. Same with Buckskin Bear Valley in Iron County.
So just trying to keep in mind that these are species that we're trying to avoid being listed, and that because they're so sensitive that way with a lot of those issues is why we have such strict restrictions on whether or not they can be hunted. So it is unfortunate. We're hoping that through habitat projects and through enough of our other methods that we're trying to bolster the populations that we could hopefully increase those one day, and translocations may play into that as well. But unfortunately, the way that the law is right now is that we've got to have those 500 breeding pair in order to institute a hunt.
I understand that there's a lot of different things as far as sage hens go.
Thanks, Gene. Bart, did you have additional questions?
I did. It was about the air rifles for the turkey hunts. And I was just, reviewing the Utah National Wild Turkey Federation's comments and their concern about that leading to an increase in injuring turkeys, leaving injured turkeys in the field. And just want to know what your comments were on that. And if you had any plans to address that or try to minimize that possibly negative effect of this recommendation.
Good question. So we did, maybe I should have put this into the presentation so that it might have been a little bit more clear, but it's only listed in the RAC packet. So I could see that the hesitation from some of the public that maybe didn't see the RAC packet, how they would feel like this may not be lethal enough. We do have a few stipulations. Do you guys just want me to go over those really quickly, or are you all familiar?
Heather, if you could go over those real quickly, I think it would be good.
Great.
Especially where this is a public comment.
Definitely. So we have just a few of these stipulations are it must be a pre-charged pneumatic air rifle, meaning that it's a rifle that fires a single projectile with a compressed air release from a chamber that is built into the rifle and pressurized at 2,000 to 3,000 psi from an external high compression device or source, such as a hand pump, compressor, or scuba tank. And it also would need to be a pre-charged pneumatic air rifle with firing a single broadhead tipped bolt or arrow or pellet or slug during the fall turkey season that is a 22 caliber or larger, weighs 18 grains or more, and is fired at a velocity to produce at least 30 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. So with the research that we've done online and speaking with other states and everything, we felt that that would be lethal. So, and again, it's only used for the fall season to help just authorize another weapon type for opportunity, since those fall areas are where we're trying to reduce populations.
Thank you.
All right, any additional questions? If not, we'll move on to the comments. So we'll do the same order. Austin, do you have any comments?
I do have some comments just regarding this youth turkey hunt and this recommendation. I would like to see some feedback from other RAC members, what their experience is in their communities and with their portions of the public that they represent. But I personally would like to see, as much youth opportunity as possible. It's getting more and more difficult, it would appear, for a youth to draw a limited entry permit, taking 2 to 4 points to be, essentially guaranteed a bonus permit in the draw. So I think increasing opportunity maybe in the form of a higher percentage of the limited entry permits would make more sense to me than to adjust this youth hunt cutting into the current limited entry season and potentially upsetting those hunters at this time. So those are my comments.
Thanks, Austin. Bart?
None.
Okay. Gene?
I'd like to make a comment on this wildlife management area closures. I don't like the wording for sponsored events. I think that what might happen is that the conservation groups might decide to sponsor an event to raise funds for conservation. I'm good with it as long as it's all youth, but I'm not good with it for a pheasant group or some other group coming in to have a sponsored fundraising event on it. And I think that the way it's worded leaves it open for that to happen.
Heather, could you provide any clarity there?
I would love to. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so you know, the division sponsored or co-sponsored events, the Division of Wildlife's policy is to not take money for these kinds of things. So these, in the past, traditionally, they've all been free events. We plan to continue that. For the division to set up some kind of paying event would be something that would be incredibly difficult to do, and there's no interest there. So this would just be free events for the public who could register, first come, first served. And we wouldn't be open to closing a WMA for any other organization to make money.
Okay, I'm still skeptical because the pay to slay gets into everything, it seems like, as far as this hunting goes.
And just to piggyback on that, that was kind of my concern. You know, what guardrails are there to make sure it doesn't become something like that?
There could easily be something put in the verbiage that it had to be a free cost, you know, and partnering with the division. So we would be able to oversee that aspect. If that's a concern, you could definitely put that into the wording.
All right, thank you. Nick, do you have any comments?
No comment at this time. Thank you.
All right, Chad.
Well, yeah, I do. I just want to, and it's more of a question now on the WMAs. My understanding from Heather, from you answering the questions, was that there really weren't any native populations of birds on this land. It was just using the land to place birds and then have an event. Is that correct?
There may be some in some areas with the right riparian corridors where there could be some native birds, but places where we're conducting these kinds of hunts, it is strictly a put and take situation where we're putting birds out there and, you know, and then the event participants are able to go harvest them, and we put them out there prior to each session. So we're pretty sure that those are the birds that are getting harvested. And yeah, and it's generally for, you know, beginners and youth, so it's not something where they're damaging the population, and it's an all male only hunt, of course, with the pheasants.
Heather, you know what, I wonder if maybe appropriate, but might add some clarity to this. I've participated in these events quite a few times and helped with them. And I wonder, for those that haven't been there, if maybe you could just take a second to explain what these events look like, because there may be some confusion on what's going on these events. Would you mind just briefly talking about how these events happen and what happens during them?
Sure. So essentially, what we would do is put out a registration form online for people to register for these events. And we've held these historically in the Pavant and Annabella WMAs, and also the Ogden Bay WMAs just started to have these as well. So people would register for that. Then SFW, we go help them get the birds from the grower the day before and bring all the crates of birds, go out that morning, have a safety meeting, check everybody in, make sure everyone understands all the rules and regulations and safety precautions and everything. Then we go out and plant birds. A lot of times they're spun and then their head tucked under a wing under a bush, so they kind of stay there. And these are all generally most areas that aren't wild birds anyway, and our growers are all disease free tested as well, in case that was an issue with impact to wild populations. So we don't have to worry about that either. So we put out all the birds and then we let them know that it's time to go distribute. They go out in different sections of the WMA and harvest until, you know, their allotted amount of time. Then they come back in and we do the same thing for a second or sometimes a third session for the day. So that's kind of how the breakdown of how those work. If anybody else has anything to add to that.
I think that may help. I think they're likely that some people haven't seen these events, and after you see these events and how it's kind of structured, maybe some of the fears of what you're doing would go away, because it's a very structured event. Like you said, the birds are planted many times after the first wave of kids go out, and if they don't harvest, the people that helped put the birds out kind of point them to the bush that maybe they can go kick. And it's about providing a great experience for people that wouldn't otherwise be in the field many times. Other comments? Tammy, I guess we're to you.
No comment right now. I've seen the pheasant hunts as well, other than that, and I think that they are a great opportunity for grandparents and parents to get their kids involved. It's a good experience for them.
Okay, Dan, do you have any comments?
No comments, thank you.
Okay, I just wondered, there was, we had a couple comments from the Turkey Federation, which I don't know that anyone really addressed, from the pheasants, and then also Austin brought up just if we want to have any further discussion on SFWs. I want to make sure before we head into a motion that we've had ample opportunity to add any comments or any thoughts we may have. So let me just kind of open it up one more time. If there are no additional comments, we could entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, this is Austin, I would just bring up the fact that the way I understood SFW's recommendation on the youth hunt was to cut that hunt in a little bit earlier by extending it to where most years on the calendar it would cut days out of the limited entry season, not out of the general season, into May. And so it would allow that hunt to be longer, where it would be youth only general. But it doesn't appear that any other RAC members have any comments on that. So I think I am okay with going with the division's recommendation on this, that is to not change the youth season, which is in accordance with National Wild Turkey Federation's comments as well.
Are you making a motion, Austin? Or is that a comment?
That was a comment.
Okay.
Would you accept that as a motion? Because I was just going to say what he said, I will put in a motion.
Okay, so Tammy, would you mind just stating a motion? And I think the motion is just to accept the recommendations as presented, if that's where we're at. But if you'd mind just stating the motion, and so we have it on record.
I would like to make a motion that we accept the recommendations from the division as written, or however you want to say that.
I'll second that.
So Tammy made a motion, Nick seconded. Do we have any additional comments on the motion? Discussion?
Could we add the language for making sure some verbiage about not pay to slay, as was mentioned earlier?
You can make an amendment to the motion if you want to.
I want to make sure I use the right terms, because that's
I'm not sure the amendment should say pay to slay, but
yeah.
However you want to say it.
They aren't revenue generating, and they're for the benefit of the public? I mean, that's currently the way they're done now, correct?
Yeah.
So
they are not generate, not revenue generating. Is that what you said?
So I would amend it to add language so that, the closures are not revenue generating and are beneficial to the public.
Okay. Do we have a second to that amendment?
Oh, second.
Gene seconded the amendment. So what we would do is we would first, any additional discussion on that amendment, then we'd vote on the amendment, and then we'd go back and vote on the initial motion. Any discussion on this amendment?
Mr. Chair, this is Austin. Just to clarify, this is stating that a WMA cannot be closed for a sponsored youth event unless it is non-revenue generating. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, correct, Bart?
That is correct. Basically, continue the procedures as I believe was articulated as done now. And so it doesn't turn into a revenue generating scheme. That's all. Because what we're doing is giving latitude to close WMAs, at their discretion. So we just want to put some guardrails on it.
Bart, this is Kevin. Let me ask for some clarification as I'm trying to capture the motion here. So it's to amend the motion to state that WMA closures are non-revenue generating, and what else did you say? There was another part to that.
To the benefit of the general public.
And benefit the general public.
Yes.
Now, is the non-revenue generating, is that relative to the Division of Wildlife or the group that co-sponsored?
I mean, to me, it should be probably a cost neutral. You know, I assume you want, typically, do they fund or does it cost? Do they generate revenue to cover their cost or?
No, currently these are actually quite expensive. But I could see a scenario where maybe there was an option to recoup the cost with a small fee for registration. That's not currently what we're doing, but I guess I wouldn't want to limit that so that we could continue the program under that scenario.
Right.
If
I
needed
think
to make it go forward.
I mean, I would say revenue neutral, whatever the right terminology that you would use, so that it could cover costs, but not be profit. We don't want it to, the purpose of it to be, be a fund or a revenue stream for the DNR. It should be for the benefit of the public.
Just one more side note on that too, is there is a DWR lands rule that should prohibit that from happening also, but I can send that to the chair to disseminate to the RAC as well.
And it could be in accordance with that rule or something.
It would be well, we have an amendment in a second, so we should probably vote on it. And we're not making rules, the Wildlife Board will. I guess my comment would be where we already have a lands rule that kind of takes care of that concern. It may not be needed, but I don't know that matters for what we are doing here. We can kind of leave that to the board.
I have one concern. I mean, if you have SFW involved or any other type of organization involved, they may be out soliciting donations to help fund the activity. They may actually make money for their coffers in soliciting those donations if they exceed the cost of the activity. And you got a pheasant farmer who's making money on this as well. So I don't know, how do you limit that? If we've already got a rule, I think you just probably stick with it.
Let me vocalize a concern too that's kind of already been addressed. Again, I've been fairly heavily involved in these. In fact, I think I've had pheasants in my garage for I don't know how many years now. We storm in the garage overnight for the next day's activity. There is a lot of money donated to this. It comes at quite a cost to the groups that are helping put these on. I definitely understand the concern and where you're coming from. Again, I would maybe just offer my opinion that if you saw these and how these happened, maybe some of these concerns would go away. It comes at quite an expense for the groups that are putting them on. There is no revenue, not even close to revenue generating on these. And that doesn't even include all the labor that goes into raising these birds for free. Any additional discussion? Let's go ahead and vote on the amendment then.
Okay, let me restate the amendment, Braden.
Okay.
So we have a motion to amend to state that WMA closures are for revenue neutral events and that benefit the general public. Does that capture it? Bart?
Yes.
All right, so let's do a roll call vote. Austin?
No.
Bart?
Yes.
Gene? Gene? We can't hear you.
Yes.
Thank you. Chad?
No.
Nick?
Yes.
Tammy?
No.
And Dan?
No.
Okay, so the amendment fails. 3 yeses and 4 noes. So now we'd go back and vote on the initial motion, which was to take the recommendations as presented. Let's go ahead and vote on that. Austin,
Yes.
Bart,
Yes.
Gene,
Yes.
Chad,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
Tammy,
Yes.
and Dan.
Yes.
Great. So the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Let's move on to agenda item number 6, the Migratory Upland Game Recommendations and Swan Rule Amendments. So let's first go to Kevin for the public comments.
Sorry, I was on mute. Public comments on this. The second agenda item were similar to the first agenda item. We had 2 comments, 1 in favor and 1 neutral.
These are very polarizing issues, apparently. Questions from the RAC? Austin, we'll start with you. This will be the last time, then we'll switch it up.
No, Mr. Chair, I do have a question. I don't know if Blair is available, but just for clarification on the tagging of swans, I'm a little bit familiar with swan hunting, but essentially if you were to be hunting, say, off of a dike on the Bear River Bird Refuge or something like that, you would be able to retrieve that animal or retrieve the swan, return to the dike, and then proceed to notch your tag. Is that accurate?
Yep, that is correct. So our current rule requires you to tag the swan at the location of kill. And so in the example you just stated, it's not really feasible to do that when you shoot a swan and it falls out in the middle of a water body. So we're just allowing people to retrieve that swan back to a place where they can tag it adequately.
And just a quick follow-up question on that. So you would not be able to return back to your vehicle. You would still have to do it as soon as you got to dry land. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so we had a hard time kind of defining what that would be. So it'd probably be the first location you come to where it would be feasible to do that. So either returning to your boat or a kayak or canoe, something like that you'd been hunting out of, or back to the dike or dry ground, essentially. So you wouldn't be able to return back to your vehicle or, more than probably 100 yards or more. And some of that would be to the discretion of the law enforcement officer.
Okay, thank you.
Bar?
Oh,
Gene? Any questions?
No questions.
Chad?
No questions.
Nick?
No questions.
Tammy?
No questions.
And Dan?
No questions.
All right, we will go to comments and we'll go back to you, Austin. Any comments?
I do not have any comments.
Bart?
no comments.
Gene?
No comment.
Chad?
No comments.
Nick?
No comments.
Tammy?
No comment.
And Dan?
No comments.
Okay. I will entertain a motion then if anyone's ready to make a motion.
I would motion that we accept the recommendations as presented.
Thanks, Chad. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Bart. So Chad made a motion to accept as presented and Bart gave a second to that motion. Any additional discussion? All right, let's go ahead and vote. Austin?
Yes.
Bart?
Yes.
Gene?
Yes.
Chad?
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
Tammy,
Yes.
and Dan.
Yes.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to action item number 7, which is the AIS Rule Amendments. Give it to you, Kevin, again for public comment.
I can just say ditto. It was the exact same as the last one. One comment in support and one neutral.
Okay, thank you. Comments from or questions from the RAC. We'll go in a different order this time. We'll start with you, Dan. Any questions?
No questions.
Tammy?
And Braden, just so that everybody knows, we do have Bruce Johnson on the line now. He wasn't on at the beginning of the meeting, but he is on and available to answer questions.
Thanks,
So
Kevin.
Was he going to give any kind of a read through this at all, or?
So with the process we're doing now, he wouldn't necessarily give any read through it. You know, we all watch the presentations beforehand, but he is available for clarification and questions where he is the one over this amendment or this addendum item. Did you have any questions, Tammy?
No, because the only critters I ride or drive has 4 legs or 4 wheels, so I don't know about this stuff.
Okay, Nick?
No questions.
Chad? Chad, do you have any questions? Look like Chad froze up. Maybe we'll come back to him. Gene? Oh, there you are.
Yeah, sorry about that. I did freeze up. I don't have any questions.
Thanks, Chad. Gene?
I've just asked you, is the quagga mussels still confined to just Lake Powell, or is there any other Utah waters?
Yeah, they're just in Lake Powell at this time, no other waters.
Is that it, Chad or Gene? Any additional questions?
No, that's it.
Thank you. Bart?
I had a question. Do the current regulations require resident voters to complete a invasive species education course?
Could you repeat that? I was getting some interference.
Sorry, do the current regulations, the proposal is asking for non-resident voters to complete an AIS education course. And I was just curious if residents currently are required to complete an AIS education course.
No, they are not. We encourage it just because it speeds up the process for them and it makes everything a lot smoother in all the operations that we have out in the field.
So our residents don't have to take the course, but okay.
We still offer the self-certification forms because we still have a segment of the population that benefit from the self-certification forms due to technology restrictions or whatnot. So we still have that option available.
Okay.
Thanks, Bart. Austin?
I do have a question about the non-resident $20 fee. Is that something that would be required in all lakes? And how would that be managed at Lake Powell? Would it only be at the Utah state ramps, or how would that be ran?
Yes, that would be required on all Utah waters, including the interstate waters, where they're within the state boundaries.
And one follow-up question about the education course, what does that look like? Is that something they could take when they're in line at a boat ramp to enter a park, or is it on their phone? What does that look like? And do they receive a COR or some sort of certification?
Right now, our current system is a little bit longer than what you were talking about. It's probably 30 minutes, and it can be done via phone or laptop, computer, desktop stuff. And it's not too difficult, but gets the education component handled. And they receive, that's on their phone. They can use it on their phone and present that to any of our staff, or they have the option to print that out. And I've recommended that they can print it and laminate it, and they can put it on their dashboard with, like what we do with the self-cert forms, and it's always visible.
And is that a one-time or is that a yearly thing?
Yes, that's yearly.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks, Austin. Let's go to comments. We'll start with Dan. Any comments? You're on mute, Dan.
No comments.
Thanks, Dan. Tammy?
No comments.
Nick?
No comments.
Chad?
Well, I kind of have a question now. Do you know if Lake Mead has the quagga mussel?
Yes, they do. They had it in advance of Lake Powell.
That's what I thought. And living in St. George, I see a lot of boat travel. And so is this designed to kind of prevent that from entering even these waters that get used so much?
I'm sorry, is what to prevent?
Never mind. It was a self-answering question.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to comment that we see a lot of boat traffic from Nevada and into Sand Hollow and Quell. And I know for a long while, Sand Hollow had a check station because you believe there were quagga mussels in there.
Yes, that's why we have the port of entry mandatory inspection station there on the border, and we do see a lot of traffic. You're correct.
Okay, thanks, Chad. Gene?
Just want to say I really appreciate that they've been able to hold this problem to Lake Powell and not to any other Utah waters.
Thank you. It's from the hard work of all the staff around the state. Very diligent, very dedicated employees. Thank you.
Thanks, Gene. Bar?
I guess the comment about how are the out-of-state residents going to take the course, and if they get on, say at Waweep or something, do we have Utah DNR at Waweep, or how do you ensure that they take those courses before they actually get into Utah waterways, especially if they're on a boat?
Part of the administrative rule proposal is that they take that course and they pay for it at that same time, and they are required to present that or have that displayed. So they will carry either one or two pieces of paper, depending upon how they work. If they print it separately or print it together, that would show they took the required course, that they have a receipt showing payment for that required non-resident fee. And then, yes, we intend to enforce that in the future. We are working on that program right now and developing how that's going to work for them at this time. It won't take effect until later this year, towards the end of the boating season. And we fully intend this year to be more education-based and providing those opportunities and educating the non-residents to the new program. And we will look towards further measures next boating season.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bar. Austin?
No comments.
All right. At this time, we'd entertain a motion.
I would make a motion that we accept the division's recommendations as stated.
I'll
Thank you,
second that.
Tammy.
mo-
So we have a motion from Tammy to accept as presented and Nick with the second on that motion. Let's go ahead and vote, or actually, I guess any additional discussion? All right, Dan,
Yes.
Tammy,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes,
Chad,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Bart,
Yes.
and Austin.
Yes.
Great, passes unanimously. To the last agenda item, the walk-in access rule amendments. So again, I think we're going to get a repeat of the last set of public comments, but we'll ask Kevin to bring us up to speed.
Exactly the same as the last two. Two comments, one in support, one neutral.
Thanks, Kevin. Questions from the RAC, and we'll start in the same order we did this last time with Dan. Any questions?
No questions.
Tammy?
Just curious why this meeting is not so controversial. We needed one of those, right?
Well, we tried to introduce a little bit with the first agenda item, Tammy, but no one really bit. So the rest of the meeting's pretty easy.
I appreciate that. It's been a long day already, so I have no questions.
Nick?
no questions.
Chad?
No questions.
Jean?
I have one question. Is this walk-in access and blue ribbon stream access the same thing?
Bryan, you're not coming in. It doesn't show you're muted, but we can't hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you now.
Is that working?
Yep.
Okay. It's probably just not plugged in all the way. So the walk-in access properties we have are agreements, they're leases basically we make with private landowners. Some are for hunting and some are for fishing and some actually are for both. It's not necessarily tied to anything related to blue ribbon fisheries, although some of the walk-in access properties are really great places to fish.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Bart
No questions.
and Austin.
No questions.
All right, we'll go to comments, starting with Dan.
No comments.
Tammy?
No comments.
Nick?
No comments.
Chad?
No comments.
Jean?
No comment.
Bart?
No comments.
And Austin.
No comments.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion
All right, what's your motion?
to pass the proposal as recommended. Is that the right term to use?
Sounds good. Yep.
All
Thanks,
right.
Bart. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
So we have a motion
second
from
that.
Bart to accept as presented and Chad with a second. Any additional discussion? Okay, we'll take vote. Dan?
Yes.
Tammy? We got a thumbs up.
Yes.
There we go. Yes, thank you. Nick?
Yes,
Chad?
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Bart?
Yes.
Austin?
Yes.
All right. That is all we have on the agenda today. Appreciate everyone that's watching. We appreciate the RAC for being here, for the division staff. Hopefully our next meeting, maybe we'll be back in person. So we'll, I don't have the date on that. Do we know, what is the date of the next RAC meeting? Kevin, do you have that? I don't think it's on there. I think we have a little break though. I think it's a couple months out, but I don't have the date.
We should
August
have a
4th?
June meeting,
Okay.
or no, end of July, first part of August. Yeah, so August 4th will be the next.
August 4th will be the next one. So a little bit of a break, and hopefully the world's getting back to normal by then. I think we all hope for that. So thanks everyone for your time. Maybe in the next meeting, Tammy, we could talk about something like spike elk hunting or something just to get people excited if that's your request. So
Well, I'm just glad that we're not all driving home 3 hours in a blizzard tonight.
yeah.
Gene's had to do that a few times.
Yes, he has.
Him
Any, oh, sorry, Tammy.
No, I just said him and Verland always have a long road home.
Yes, they do. Anything else tonight that anyone wants to bring up, or are we ready to close the meeting?
Thanks, Braden. Good meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yep. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
How do you leave the meeting?